Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I am joined by Carissa Hodgson, and she is, guys, first and foremost, she is the child of a parent who had cancer. So I know a lot of parents, we wonder, okay, how much should we tell our kids, right? Even adult kids, how much should we tell our families about our diagnosis? And if you're in the thick of parenting with young kids, then this is an even trickier question. So Carissa, do you want to just tell us a little about your story and who you are and kind of what your history is with cancer?
Yeah, you got it. So my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer when I was 7, and he died from that cancer. And that was a pretty formative event of my childhood, as you can imagine. And then it wasn't until then my stepfather had liver cancer when I was sort of just graduating college that I realized it was sort of my calling to work with families affected by cancer. I was already a clinical social worker at the time, but it was that idea that being able to support not just the person with cancer, but the entire family system that resonated because I could remember what it was when I was 7. And then I could remember what, of course, it was to be that young adult and how it really did affect how I processed my feelings and moved through it because of the support we had or didn't have and the conversations that were being held in my family. And I knew that it was important to me to be with those families and help support parents because what I can, hear all of the time from a parent just diagnosed with cancer is, what am I going to tell my kids? In fact, that's usually the first question out of their mouth. And so I have been working as an oncology social worker for about 15 years and have been in that role really specifically focused on parents with cancer and how to help kids and teens. I started out as a program manager at Gilda's Club Madison, and for the last 2.5 years, I've been the director of programs and community outreach at Bright Spot Network. So I've gone from more local in-person cancer support to now serving parents across the country. And it has really been quite an honor to be able to help parents get connected to the support they need because it feels very isolating, and also then to the resources they need to have these conversations, because ultimately that's really what parents are looking for, is that guidance and validation that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is one of the biggest worries that I had when I was initially diagnosed. And so I was diagnosed over 4 years ago. And at the time I had kids from kindergarten age down to a baby. And so, I talk a lot to my family, my friends, just personally, when I talk about my kids, I talk about how this is shaping their childhood and how I can't necessarily avoid that. And all I can do is do the best that I can to support that. And so I actually stumbled across the Bright Spot Network and Carissa because of a Zoom, I think it's a Zoom support network that you guys have, as well as a grant that was available to parents with cancer who just need a little extra financial support for whatever's going on in your cancer care. And it was just a huge gift for me to find this community and to be able to know that I can tap into it whenever I need to. And the conversations that I've been able to participate in through these Zoom groups, they've been so helpful. Even though they're not necessarily people who have my brand of cancer, they are still really, really helpful conversations to have. So you guys who are listening, keep an eye out. We're going to talk more about the Bright Spot Network. But for now, Chris, I really want to get into the meat of our conversation. So our biggest worry as parents sometimes is, how do I talk to my kids? And I think that maybe we overcomplicate this sometimes, but how would you suggest that our listeners, you guys who are listening, how would you suggest that they approach conversations with kids about cancer?
Yeah. And the first point I always make is honesty really is the best policy, because I think as parents, we often want to protect our children. I am also a parent, so I get it. Though what we know about kids is they have these incredible imaginations, which is wonderful. Unfortunately, when there are times of secrecy or stress, kids can use that imagination to make up stories far worse than the truth. So what we found is that when parents withhold information or try to keep a cancer diagnosis from their children, kids will actually have increased worries and stress because they're not dumb. They pick up on changes in energy in hushed conversations. They overhear telephone conversations or see a text. They see changes in routine and caregivers. So even really young children can pick up on, whoa, something's different here. What's going on? So if we're not telling kids the truth, they will make up something far scarier. I can guarantee that. So I really do tell parents, be honest. Now, that doesn't mean you tell them everything. You don't sit a child down and give them these long, in-depth medical conversations about, the dirty details of all of your treatment and side effects. So of course you're going to phrase a conversation with a 4-year-old much different than you would with a 14-year-old. But for the most part, I also do say, and this is to your point, edit down. Start super simple, because we also have this gift of filling in. We just talk too much as adults. So I try to think, and I actually encourage parents, especially of young children, to write out some sentences and then take those sentences and just edit them down to the super basics and start, especially when you have young children, when you're talking to a preschooler, 5-year-old, up through even, school age, short sentences, start very basic and just start there. Then see what questions your child has, because these are never one and done conversations. You'll be revisiting this over and over. So it's okay to start very basic. I would say always include words your child will overhear. So talk about what cancer is. If you're going to be having chemotherapy, radiation, what is that? So explain those words. And then if you can, cover what I think are some of the most basic concerns kids always have, which are, did I cause it? So you want them to know nothing you did or said caused me to get cancer, right? The other one is, can I catch it? You cannot catch this. You can hug me and snuggle me all you want. It doesn't mean that you're going to catch my cancer. This is not COVID or the flu. And that can be confusing for young kids because you're often wearing masks because you're immunocompromised, and that gets very confusing. So tell them all the time, nope, you can't catch this. It is not your job to cure me. I have a great medical team. They're doing everything they can. Your job is just to give me lots of hugs and snuggles. And then kids are very egocentric. So then they want to know who's going to care for me, who's going to make my lunch, who's going to pick me up from school. So reinforcing that no matter what happens, someone will always be there to care for you and love you and take care of you. These are points that you'll want to circle back to constantly, just to remind your kids, you're okay.
Well, and I love those little reassurances, right? Those, I guess, really just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 really key reassurances, right? Cancer's not your fault. You can't catch it. I think that's actually kind of cute. You can't catch it. It's not your job to make me feel better. And someone will always be there to care for you. And also, if you have questions or, anytime you have questions, you can always talk to me about it. Because I do think that, I think this could be true of anything, right? Anything that we're talking to our kids about that's new or that's kind of unfamiliar territory, that talking about in these terms would be so helpful. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just gonna blip in here with the times that I have told my kids about different things. And so with my eye diagnosis, those of you guys who've had brachytherapy or have had radiation to your eye, you guys know you can't actually be around kids for a short period of time because you have radiation actively in your body. And as a precaution, they suggest that you not spend time hardly at all around anyone under the age of 18. And that's just a precaution, but it's still, at least for me, it meant that I spent a week away from my kids for my primary treatment, where they couldn't even come and visit me. All they could do was call me and talk to me on the phone, just to try to make sure we could keep them as safe as possible if there was any risk. And I just remember that was kind of debilitating as a parent, but also for my little kids, it was kind of confusing, right? They're, well, mommy is sick, but I can't even go and be with her. And so I think you said keeping it simple and just telling them the basics, and then also just reminding and reassuring them that, okay, when this is done, then mommy will be home, and just continuing to remind them of that. And it gets a little bit repetitive, I think, sometimes, especially if you're spending a specific duration of time in a treatment. But it is, I think, helpful to just to just reaffirm that, okay, everything is going to come back together. Mommy will come home. And just reminding them of kind of the present certainties, maybe not focusing so much on the things way in the future, because I think that's one of the questions that I know my older kids have had is, well, are you going to be okay, or are you going to die? And it's like, I can't really answer that question super accurately, other than to just tell them that today I'm okay, tomorrow I'm going to be okay, and that I'm going to keep having lots of tomorrows. And that my doctors are, just reassuring them of the things that we do know, instead to just offer that reassurance and that certainty, which is so tricky, because I think that we want that reassurance ourselves, right? We want to know that we're going to be okay, and to not be able to give that to our kids, I think, can be kind of painful sometimes. But to just let them know that, that we're going to do everything that we can, and that our doctors are doing everything that they can to make sure that we're okay.
Definitely. Living with uncertainty, you said, it's hard for all of us. As a human, that's a very difficult thing. And so, of course, for children, it can be extra difficult.
Yeah.
And so I love how you are staying very present and focusing on the here and now. And most parents do find that that really is the best approach. That it's okay to still validate your kids' good questions and fears, wondering what's going to happen down the road, and say, yeah, sometimes that scares me too. Sometimes that worries me too. And what works for me is to really focus on today. That helps me. And
That's such
really
an
good role
important
modeling.
skill.
Yes.
Yeah. That role modeling, that's such a good thing. And that's one of the things that I talk to my therapist all the time about, is this idea that, okay, I can't make this any easier for them. No matter where in life they will be, this will affect them at some point. They're probably going to do therapy as adults and process this more. And if there are, more hard things that happen in our lives because of me having cancer, then it will happen. And I won't necessarily have any control over that happening to my kids. And
Right.
that's uncomfortable, right? I can't protect them from that. I can't protect them from the inevitability that one day I will die, even if it's when I'm 98 and I'm super old. I can't protect them from the future grief, right?
Right.
What I can do is I can equip them with tools. I can teach them and model for them what is good mental health support look. What are the resources and the people they could turn to for support? And that is hugely empowering to me as a parent, just to remember that I'm not helpless here, and
Yes.
that while I don't have control over every outcome in the future, I do have some control of the here and now in what I choose to do with that time as a parent. So one of the tricky things with kids, right, especially if you've got young kids who are then growing up with your diagnosis, I did, you have kids who at some point they have really basic questions, and then they get a little older and they have more questions. So one of the things that you touched on was this idea of following your kid's lead. So what does that mean? Because I think that you said as parents, we have a tendency to information dump.
Yes, right? Yeah, that's a great question. I do, because every kid is different. I suggest following their lead, because some kids will only want the bare bones, and that's all they need, and they feel okay with that. There's really no need to have to continually give them more information if they're not asking for it, because it may then cause them more worry. Whereas you might have, even if you have multiple kids, you might have different approaches. So then you have another child who really finds comfort in information and they have tons of questions. Well, then maybe with that child, you're having more frequent conversations. Maybe you're actually looking into reputable sources of information to kind of gather more data, whatever it is that that child feels they need to feel more comfortable. So I always tell parents, you are an expert in your children. So you might go out and talk to different experts about cancer and mental health and coping, but then always filter that through your own parent gut and use what you know is best for each of your children, because really, truly, every kid is different.
Yeah. I love that you have this idea of just, it's not a one and done thing, right? It's not you just talk about it once and then it never comes up again.
Exactly.
It's you talk about it once and then you revisit it. And I love, back to those kind of 5 points, those 5 maybe core values or core beliefs that we want to help instill in our kids, is that whole idea that it's not your fault. You can't catch it. It's not your job to fix this for me, and that someone will always be there to care for you. Those reassurances, just continuing to kind of lead it back to those, even with any new questions, because I think that it's the new questions. I think for me, whenever I have new things to deal with, right, new levels of uncertainty, new difficult kind of things to cope with in my diagnosis, or really just anything, then it can be kind of tricky in our brains. Our brain kind of starts to panic. Oh no, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. When really all we have to do is apply, previous learnings to what we're currently dealing with, or this new question. So I think just providing those reassurances for sure, and just revisiting it.
Yeah, definitely. And part of that providing reassurance and revisiting is letting your children know, if I have new information or if something changes, I will tell you. They need to trust that
if
you
there's
will
something important,
Yes.
you will know. We will tell you. We're not going to leave you in the dark. But I mean, I don't necessarily tell my kids this, but kind of tempering that with the idea that as a parent, I'm going to filter the type of information, the depth of the information that I give to my kids based on, like you said, the parenting gut, right? So if you don't feel it's a good idea to talk to your kids about more of the ins and outs, or kind of maybe the emotional uncertainties that you're dealing with as a parent, then maybe you don't talk about those things with your kid, and you talk about them with your spouse, or you talk about them with your parent or a counselor, or just whatever that resource looks. And I think that, let's maybe give a disclaimer here that we're all just figuring this out, and that there isn't really a right way, and that all of us are going to maybe quote unquote make mistakes. And I think that the best that we can do is just adapt and improve, maybe how we do this and just improve our communication with our families and with our kids.
That's exactly right. And we know, I mean, you said we're human, we're going to make mistakes. And if you're a parent, you know that you probably already made mistakes.
Oh my gosh.
But one of the best ways to role model that is to acknowledge to your kid, we all make mistakes, because they need to know that. And you always have the opportunity to make a fix up and to say, the next day, hey guys, I'm really sorry that I was short with you, that I, kind of blew up on you. I was feeling really anxious about my upcoming, scan, and that made me really irritable. And so I'm really sorry that I yelled at you. I think next time I'm going to try and maybe do some deep breathing when I'm feeling that way. Where, let them know sort of what you're going to do to try to be different, because then they can see, oh, I can make fix-ups too, and I can grow.
And taking accountability, right? Taking accountability for our own feelings and how we are kind of projecting those feelings on our surrounding world. One of the things that I love doing, at least, is finding books to help my kids make some connections. So do you have any books that you would suggest that parents use to kind of guide some of these conversations or to introduce some of these topics?
Definitely. We know that one of the best ways to talk about new concepts with kids is books. I mean, if you're a parent, you're already doing this. Every time you're trying to expose them to maybe something new, you can find a children's book that not only has the language that you're wanting to use, but the pictures and the images, and that really reinforces the message that you're trying to share. So when you're talking about cancer, a book can give you the perfect guide of what to say. And in fact, that's what we hear from parents all the time is, I had no idea what to say. And so by using a book, it basically just guided me through the conversation. And so you can find some really great books that walk through the information of cancer. Someone I Love Has Cancer talks not only about what cancer is and what treatment looks, but it talks about the common emotions and questions that kids have and how you might want to cope through those feelings. So there's some really great informational books about that. Then you have really reassuring books. Cancer Hates Kisses is probably our most requested book through Bright Reads, which is a program that we offer where parents can request free books about cancer, big feelings, grief, and loss.
And I go back to that.
Yes, we'll come back to that. But I think parents love that book because it's so reassuring, and especially if you have young kids and you want to double down on that message of nothing, you don't have to do anything except for love me. It's not your job to take care of me. Just let's hug each other. And it also shows, again, you can't catch it. That's a great book. Then you have some really fun, more whimsical books, Stickers on Her Bald Head for hair loss. There's some really great books about hair loss, which is a big deal for kids, physical changes. So that book, and Mama's Afro is a Soldier too, Nowhere Hair, those are all specific to hair loss. There's some books specific to having a dad with cancer, because most books out there show moms with cancer. So if you are a father with cancer, you want to maybe find some of those books. Then you have books for kids that really are geared towards just information. And so there's a book out there that was written had in mind kids on the spectrum and kids who have autism, but it's really great for other kids that also just really Q&A format. So I Have a Question About Cancer is really great. And then you have books that aren't maybe cancer specific, but focus on a theme that's very relatable. Separation anxiety is huge, especially with young kids. I mean, you're talking about spending a week away from your kid. That can be really common. Regardless of your cancer diagnosis, you might be away for surgery, you might be traveling for a clinical treatment, a clinical trial, whatever it is. And so having to prepare your kids for that separation can be really difficult. So using a book, Invisible String, that talks about that relationship and connection you have with your children that exists no matter what, no matter how close or far away you are, can be really reassuring to kids of all ages.
The Bright Reads program. And I definitely want to come back and really just kind of hone in on the Bright Spot Network and the programs that they have, that you guys have, that offer support for our listeners who are parents with cancer. So let's just revisit that shortly, but I do want to keep going, talking a little about these books, right? You've given some really good books. I know that one of the tricky things in our diagnosis is dealing with a metastatic disease. And so that, you said that's an advanced cancer, or that's when the cancer has progressed past just a primary location, which for ocular melanoma, that means that no longer is it just the eye affected, the whole body is somehow involved. Usually it's the liver or the lungs, but sometimes it can be other areas. And the types of therapies, the types of treatments that we have, they honestly look pretty different. But I think that the worries and the kind of the fear level goes up when you have a metastatic diagnosis to deal with. So do you have any suggestions for talking to kids about a metastatic diagnosis versus just general cancer?
Yes. So this is when I would go back and use that idea of staying in the present can be very helpful because, again, there's extra uncertainty. And that doesn't mean that it's not appropriate to talk about death and dying. If your kids have questions and you feel like they'd benefit from talking about the life cycle and end of life, that can be really helpful, certainly. But as far as just day to day, usually just staying present, talking about, today, tomorrow. Most parents find that even if they are even entering sort of an active dying stage, it's best not to have conversations about dying until the parent really is no longer able to engage in daily activities. So when kids can notice mom no longer can get out of bed, mom no longer can engage with us, that kind of cues them to say, oh, something is very, very different. And then those more in-depth conversations about death tend to take place. But before that, it's really, again, focusing on the here and now. And there are some great books to help kids through this. So many books out there really do focus on parents having cancer, getting treatment, getting better, all is better. Everything is over and done with. When that does not capture the realities of a parent living with a chronic or metastatic disease. And so there are a few really great books out there that help with the chronicity or the seriousness of cancer. 3 that I know of are What Happens When Someone I Love Can't Get Better by Sarah Olsher. There's The Cancer That Wouldn't Go Away by Hadassah Field. And there's a newer book called The Adventure Jar that, again, it's about metastatic breast cancer, but it would be appropriate for any type of cancer that focuses on how kids can cope with big feelings and stay present.
Yeah, I love that. And these are some really fantastic books. I will do my best to just get as many of these linked, or at least probably just a link to the Bright Reads program would be a good spot. Do you think?
That'd be great.
Yeah, just to point you guys back so you can get access to these books if you guys listening really want to have a couple of these in your home library. I know I'm sitting here going, well, I guess these are the books we're getting for Christmas. Yay! I love it. So, and I love that you talked about just this idea of staying present, right? That the more that we can focus on just being in the here and now. And I do want to point out too that as far as those difficult, more difficult conversations or those conversations about death and dying and just mortality that could result from your diagnosis, I love that you pointed out that you don't necessarily, you as the patient don't have to be the one to lead that conversation. That's actually probably going to fall to your loved ones, to, grandparents, to a father figure if you're the mom with cancer, or to, just a spouse or a partner. Because you said if you're no longer the patient participating in daily activities, then you may not really have the bandwidth to have that conversation with your kids. And the control freak in me hates that. I'm going to be totally honest. But I can also see how that would be a little bit of maybe a gift or a relief, especially if you're at that point, to just kind of have people, just have people in your life reassuring you as the patient that, okay, you don't have to carry this. We will carry this for you. Well, man. Wasn't planning on crying today, guys, but here we are. So
this is when having that really authentic, genuine team surrounding you is so valuable. That understands you and your values and how you want to message that to your kids. And it might even mean that if you are able to be in that space, even when you're well, to have a conversation with at least one important person. It might be your partner, it might be a parent, best friend, to say, these are the issues, the concepts I really want you to convey to my kids. It might be even that if you are engaging in legacy projects ahead of time and writing letters or emails or notes to your kids, you can even, write it out yourself if you want. But it definitely is something that you can help shape. And not only is it a gift to your children and to your loved ones, but it's also a gift to yourself because it helps you process through some of that anticipatory grief.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's so important. And I've talked about anticipatory grief with so many different people just over the years. And it's something that, with a metastatic diagnosis, we are constantly cycling through anticipatory grief. And just grief in general, where we're just grieving kind of life as we knew it before. So I think that that's so important to recognize and to validate for yourself as a parent with cancer or just as a patient with cancer. One of the things that you guys do that I know that I touched on earlier was that you guys have a Bright Spot support network for stage 4 cancer patients, where you get to hang out on Zoom with other parents who have a stage 4 diagnosis. And do you want to talk a little about that?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think it keeps it keeps even getting more and more niche because, first of all, it's hard enough if you're a parent diagnosed with cancer, you're thinking, okay, I've got my mom friends, okay, I've got my chemo friends, but those two communities don't really fully get me and what I'm going through. And so to first of all, just find a community of other parents with cancer is so affirming, to just feel very normalized in what you're going through. They get it. They get the words and the feelings and experiences that you're sharing. It's even more powerful to find other parents with a similar diagnosis. And when you have a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, you really need that space to be able to explore everything you're feeling. Because so often what I hear from these parents is, even my best friend, even my partner, they're not able to go there with me. It's too scary. And I get it. Of course they don't. They don't want to explore death with me, but yet I need to. I need that for my own empowerment. I want to know what that's going to feel. Look, what are my options? What am I going to do for my kids? So to be able to sit in a space with other parents that will let you go to all of those spaces and do it very authentically and respectfully is priceless. So we do offer a virtual meeting space for parents with a stage 4 diagnosis. It's currently meeting twice a month. In the new year, we're going to pilot doing it weekly, actually, because about 45% of our community has a stage 4 diagnosis, which is unfortunately something we're seeing with young adults getting diagnosed with later stage cancers. So continuing to make very intentional space for that population is very important to us.
So important. And we will, again, link these resources. We'll link the website and just anything that will be of help in the show notes and in the description. So, okay, I know we've kind of talked about some dark and heavy topics, but let's talk a little about hope, right? And just this idea that we have the phrase, right, that everybody says, well, I'm hoping for the best for you.
I know.
I'm praying for you to be okay. I'm sending good vibes, all of those things. That can feel really kind of difficult sometimes as a young family, navigating cancer, because it's yes, of course we hope for the best, but also we have to almost prepare for the worst a lot of the time. And that can be really, really difficult. But this kind of idea of hoping for the best, what do you feel the benefits or kind of the risks of saying something that could be for kids?
Yeah. So I need to just acknowledge that can be such a triggering phrase to people with
such
cancer,
a triggering phrase,
right? And even when you can appreciate the intention behind it, okay, sort of trying to think positively or be my cheerleader, it can be really annoying because it feels very dismissive of all of the dark spaces.
Yeah, because there's so much. It's not just it right. Can't be summed up in a hoping for the best,
right? Right. So there is that. Now there's also research that shows that authentic hope can be a very powerful form of resilient coping, and that hope doesn't need to be this toxic positivity, Pollyanna-ish approach to a situation. It can truly exist even in what feels the darkest of situations. And hospice kind of came up with this idea of circles of hope and how hope can be flexible and accommodating so that you can change what the definition of hope looks like. So as someone with cancer, it might begin with, if you're kind of waiting on a diagnosis, I hope for an early stage, right? And then if you get a diagnosis that maybe is more advanced than you were thinking, you can shift that to go, okay, well, at least I hope that I can be cured. And then if you can't be cured, maybe it's that you hope for at least just being able to be stable. And even though you have a chronic cancer, I want to be stable and healthy as long as possible. Even in the face of death, if you are nearing end of life, you can shift that hope to say, I'm really hoping for a good death. I'm hoping to leave a good legacy. I want to leave a good relationship with my family. So you can have hope up until the moment that you die and it truly be authentic. So I really encourage people to lean into the, again, authentic piece of hope and how it can actually facilitate that idea of sort of meaning making and holding on to what really matters without it being dismissive of the realities of how it also really sucks.
I mean, those of you guys who follow me on social media, you guys know that one of my favorite mantras that I landed on in the beginning of my metastatic diagnosis was, I'm here today, I'll be here tomorrow, and eventually the tomorrows add up. And that for me is kind of one of my resilient coping strategies, is that I repeat that to myself, and I firmly believe that with all of my being. That doesn't answer all of the questions, right? It doesn't tell me how long I'm going to be here. It doesn't tell me if I'm going to be okay 100%. It just answers kind of the here and now questions, and it gives me some hope and some grounding in kind of where I'm at right now, which then helps me to maybe not spiral quite as much.
Yeah.
Which I think can be helpful, because there's a lot of things that we have to be kind of present for, to be able to pivot and adjust. And sometimes more than others, sometimes we get kind of a lull and this kind of this period where we're dealing with a little bit less. But a lot of the times we're coping with some big changes during cancer treatment. And so how would you suggest that parents with kids are able to, or how would you suggest that they cope with these changes that are happening if they're dealing with things that are a little bit more interruptive? Mom being in the hospital for a month or a week, or, whatever it looks like.
Yeah. As much as possible, I encourage parents to prepare their kids for change. It helps everyone to sort of anticipate and process through the big feelings if they're given a little bit of time. So if you know that a parent will be gone for an amount of time, let kids know that ahead of time. If you know that there'll be a big physical change, loss of hair, amputation, using a wheelchair, having an ostomy, letting kids know that ahead of time, maybe giving them some information, being able to sort of play through it using medical play. All of those are great ways to allow kids time to think about it, to ask questions, and to be less scared by it. That's just sort of human nature, right? If we can anticipate a change, that's great. One wonderful way to help kids understand changes in routine, because that's a big disruptor, especially for little kids that really thrive on sort of having the same routine, is using some kind of calendar or schedule. And you can make your own. You can get out, tag board, whatever it is, cut out your own pictures, or they have some really great pre-made ones. Sarah Olsher at Mighty and Bright actually has one specific to cancer that you can buy, and it has all the correct sort of magnets and pieces that you need. But when you can give even young children, because it can be pictorial instead of words, so they don't have to read, do 1 week at a time and have different markers of, these are the days I'll be at the hospital. These days, grandma and grandpa will be here to pick you up from school. These days, I'm going to be really tired and in bed most of the day. Giving them a few of those cues will really help them to prepare for what's coming and empower them actually with some agency. And if you can give kids some choices, that's great. Even if they're just little choices at a time when they feel everything is happening to them, if they can make a couple of choices and maybe who's coming to care for them, or even what that person makes in their lunch, whatever it is, small choices give them some empowerment.
I think that's so important. And I love some of these resources that you listed out. One of the things that you mentioned a little earlier was just creating a support team or leaning on your support team. What about parents who don't really have a good family support network to lean on? How would you suggest that they build a team of people who can help them out?
That can be really hard. I mean, it is actually probably one of the hardest situations I run into as I work with parents, because there are some parents who are really privileged to have great family and friends and huge communities of people showing up to help. And then there are other people that might even be single parents and they really don't have many people at all. So I think one thing I always offer is to try to engage in some creative problem solving. So are there people in your life that maybe before this you didn't consider a close friend that might actually step up? And these might be people that kind of come out of the woodwork. I hear this so often, people saying, the people I thought would show up didn't. And yet I had this random person from work that somehow knew exactly what I needed and what was going through, what I was going through. And that was the person that I felt the most support from. So first, maybe take a step back to go, are there people that maybe feel safe that you could ask to be a helper right now? The other is to use people's true intentions to work for you. So you often have people in your life that are, let me know how I can help. Let me know how I can help. And they really do mean it, but it kind of puts that onus back on you to give them something to do, which is frustrating.
You like to come up with it.
Right. I have enough on my plate. But if you have a moment, or maybe this is when you can use your partner, to actually come up with a list and write it down or put it in an email, something of all of the tasks that would be helpful. Everything from the more intimate things about taking me to treatment, sitting with me at chemo, taking care of my kids, to then the maybe, safer, I don't have to really know you that well to feel comfortable. Would you do my grocery shopping? Would you make me a meal? Would you take my kid to the park? Whatever it is, my dog for a walk. Have that list of items. So that way, the next time someone says, let me know how I can help, you can either email them, text them, give them a sheet of paper. Here's a menu of options. Let me know what works for you.
You just need to do.
Yeah, right? Basically, you choose what you want to do and let me know. That can at least help free you up from some of the time and energy suck. So even if you don't have a huge support network of people that are doing the intimate caregiving, it frees you up to be with your kids and take care of yourself while other people are doing those other tasks that you honestly don't need to show up for.
So important. And honestly, I feel like it's kind of liberating just to have that creative problem solving, just to know that it's available. And I mean, I this is maybe a belief that I have just done a lot of work to instill. And it's just that idea that, okay, this is figure outable. I don't necessarily know how yet, but it is figure outable. We can get through this. And I really think that that can be true for all of us. It just requires some level of, tenacity, resiliency, and thinking outside the box sometimes.
Yes. And these are all skills that you get to practice now that you've been given this really hard life situation. No one asked for this, and yet it is a growth opportunity for not only you and your partner, but your kids. And that's part of why we don't want to shield kids from this, because don't they also get the growth opportunity to practice some of these resilient skills of creative problem solving and reframing, empathy, compassion? We want them to have this practice as well.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that kids deal with, I think, a lot, or at least that I see with my kids, is this idea of big feelings. And that those big feelings maybe don't always translate to what I as an adult think they should translate to. And they turn into kind of some extreme behaviors or just new behaviors that I maybe don't really know what to do with as a parent, because I've never seen a kid or my kid exhibit this behavior before.
Yeah.
What kinds of advice do you have for parents in helping their kids work through some of these feelings?
Yeah, I always try to remind parents to sort of expect anything. And sometimes the way we think our kids are going to react is totally different. You might have a kid that you thought was going to weather this, be really distraught. And then you have the kid you thought was going to be anxious. They're totally fine. And that just happened. I hear it all the time. Even a parent of identical twins. There were my two twins, totally different, responded very differently. So it's okay to have tons of feelings, and it's okay to have no feelings. I think that's the other thing parents worry about, is sometimes kids are just, okay, whatever, I'm going to go play now.
Yeah, they just go out there in their own little world.
Right. And that could be really healthy compartmentalization for them. So that's great. If they're truly listening and they seem okay, great. You don't need to talk them into worrying about it.
Yeah.
But of course, then we do have kids that exhibit really big feelings. And when you have young children, it's important to recognize that there might be some regression in development, and that's normal. So if you had just potty trained your kid, or maybe your kid had been potty trained for a year or so, and all of a sudden they start having more accidents, that's normal. It really is normal and okay. And that doesn't mean anything pathological or scary. It just means they're feeling really stressed right now and they might need some extra support. If you have a kid that's, eating too much or too little, sleeping too much or too little, those might be signs that that's the way they're exhibiting some of their distress. Kids might really explode with their feelings, or they might really withdraw and go inside of themselves. So again, you're going to see these feelings come out all kinds of new and different ways. I always at first just normalize that, because if you think about how you're responding, you're also maybe feeling a mess. And so your kids are displaying their worries and distress through these behaviors as well. So again, it is okay. You want to help them to name their feelings, validate their feelings, and let them know any feeling is okay. It's okay to be angry. I think that's an important feeling to validate, because a lot of kids are talked out of their anger. But yeah, I'm angry too. And when I'm angry, I have to punch a pillow or I have to yell and scream, whatever it is. Let them know they can have their feeling, and then give them options of how they can feel that feeling. This is another great way that parents can role model having big feelings. And sometimes I encourage parents to editorialize and talk through a thought process. So if, again, you're in the moment, and this is hard to do, but you just get off of a phone call and something was really scary to you, and you're like, oh my God, I'm feeling really scared right now. I think I'm going to go in my room for 5 minutes. If you could just give me 5 minutes, I think I need to take some deep breaths and see if I can calm myself down. Go do that, come back, and then say, okay, actually that was really helpful. All you're doing is talking through your process. But again, you're showing kids kind of what you're going through, so that you're giving them a roadmap for when they feel anxious, what they might be able to do.
Well, and I love that you point out that, again, back to this role modeling thing. And isn't that what so much of parenting is?
Sure is.
Yes. Literally just being a role model on purpose or on accident for our kids. And sometimes, the times that we can make it happen on purpose, I think are some of the most valuable learning opportunities that our kids will have. And so, I know that's something that I do. Sometimes I will actually say almost word for word what you just said. I'll be like, okay, honey, go tell my husband, mommy needs to go and spend 10 minutes in her room, or I just need to go meditate for a few minutes, or, whatever it is that I think I need to do. And I will say what I need, and then I will go do it. And sometimes it feels it takes a lot of willpower to do that, right? To pull myself away from whatever level of immediate stress and worry that I'm feeling, and just do something intentional, but also to verbally model it. And I think maybe that's just been who I grew up as a teacher, or that's my, my background. And so I have a lot of tendency toward that. I'm going to talk through what I'm doing out loud around my kids as much as I can, because I want them to, it's a language thing. It's helping them to see and to model their behavior after mine. But I think that it also really helps me to verbally process what am I doing and why. And I don't know. I think that's so valuable. So I really appreciate you talking about, some of the things to look out for with big feelings, some of those maybe red flags or things that are more normal to be concerned about. And then, if parents are concerned about certain behaviors, right, the ways that their kids maybe are behaving, or maybe the tendencies that they're leaning toward, maybe some of the things that they say, if parents are concerned, where would you suggest that they reach out for more kind of strategic support?
Mm-hmm. And I want to say that it is never a bad idea to reach out for support. I think sometimes we have the stigma of if things have to be really bad to get support, or if I don't want to get my child a therapist, that must mean something's really bad or something's wrong with them. That's not at all the case. All it means is that your family is going through a really tough situation, and your kid might benefit from another caring adult who's there looking out for them, someone to listen, and maybe learning some new techniques. This is all good stuff. So, reaching out for help could be, contacting your child's pediatrician, or if your clinic has a social worker, if your child is in school, reaching out to a teacher, school staff, guidance counselor, if you are connected with a spiritual center. There are lots of different places that you can go to someone you trust and to say, hey, I feel we just need a little extra support, and let them point you in the direction of someone that might be able to help. I think most people automatically go to therapy, and of course, that's a great resource. I also want to be realistic, and we're living at a time that there's a huge demand for mental health services. There are long waiting lists. There are few therapists that work with kids and understand cancer. So it can be really, really, really hard to get your kid connected to a therapist. So if you can, great. But if you're one of those people that don't have the money or resources to do that, there are other ways. One could be, this is where we get that creative problem solving again. It could be that your clinic has a child life department, and a child life specialist could meet with your child and give them some support. There's also an online virtual child life organization called Hearts Connected that can do some virtual support with you and your kids. It might be that you still want a therapist, but there's a wait list or cost is prohibitive. Are there graduate interns in counseling, social work, family therapy that can see your child for free, and they're supervised by someone that can sort of help? That could be a great option. Let's not forget schools. If your kid is connected to a school, there's so much great support at a school. Not only teachers, but social workers, guidance counselors, nurses, coaches. There could be some really great people that can offer time away to talk and support. Then we actually have cancer support orgs that can talk specifically about cancer, and most of these are free. So you might have someplace local, maybe a local cancer support community that you can go to. If not, virtually, there are some really great organizations supporting kids. Pickles, Kesem, Wonders and Worries, Bright Spot. There are these organizations out there that can not only help, you as a parent, but be there for your kid and get them connected to peer support, because we've talked about how important that is for the adult to not feel isolated. It's just as important for your kids to have that community of people to go to. So you can get them connected to that peer support kind of community, and that goes a really long way just to affirm what they're going through.
That you keep bringing it back to this creative problem solving idea, because isn't that what it is? And that's kind of what it is. Every single thing in parenting, everything that you could come up against as a parent, some new thing to navigate, we have to kind of creatively problem solve. What do we do? How do we talk to them about this? How can we help them process this? Because at the end of the day, we are shaping and molding these little humans, and we can't necessarily do that alone. And I think that more and more we are recognizing that. And I love that the Bright Spot Network and just some of the many other places that you've referenced offer these supports to parents. Because I think one of the things that we get kind of scared by is the daunting fact of finding that information, right? So hopefully for you guys listening, this has been a way to just kind of lay it all out there as where can you get some help and support, or where can your loved ones get some help and support. And I absolutely love that you've been able to bring this to us and just break this down, and also bring your expertise as a child social worker who's worked in oncology for so long, as well as having personal experience. So Carissa, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So, okay, as we wrap up, how did, I guess just in a nutshell, how did the Bright Spot Network get started?
Yeah, you bet. So our executive director and co-founder, Haley Pollack, was diagnosed with cancer after the birth of her second kiddo. And she really noticed that there were no organizations that were focused on the parents, especially a parents of young kids. And so she couldn't find information and resources about how to wean before she was ready and how to talk to a toddler about cancer, attachment and lifting restrictions, all of these issues that were really huge for her going through treatment with 2 young kids that just wasn't available. And her clinic social worker connected her to another brand new mom, Amy Barnes, who was also our co-founder, and the 2 of them created Bright Spot Network to really fill that gap. And so we're going into our 5 years of supporting parents with cancer. And the whole mission of Bright Spot Network is to create community for parents with any cancer diagnosis, any stage, to be connected with others, to reduce isolation, and to have the tools they need to help their kids cope with cancer. And the organization does that through virtual support groups, not just for the person with cancer, but for partners, and different breakout groups as well for parents in long-term survivorship, stage 4, parents of color, for couples. So we have many different sort of breakout support groups and meetup groups. We have a lot of tools on our website, so guides and videos and coloring sheets that parents can use as they have these conversations. Our Bright Reads program sends free books to parents to talk about cancer, big feelings, grief and loss. We have a Bright Box, which is a point of connection. It's 8 different art activities that parents can do with their kids, because so often you feel you're just having to parent from the couch and you're, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this energetic 4-year-old. So we give you everything you need to just have a couple of hours of feeling a parent again. We have our Bright Grant that you referenced, a $500 grant to help with all of the cost of cancer. And then we'll have ongoing webinars and workshops and different ways to build our community. We also do have a place for kids. We have a monthly group called Bright Club and Bright Circle that brings kids together, because I said it's so important for kids to have community as well, and they can learn a little bit about cancer and some coping skills. We have a teddy bear clinic a couple of times a year that allows them to show up and be the doctor or the nurse and to work on their stuffed animal or doll and feel very empowered about what happens when mom or dad goes to the clinic, because something we see is sometimes kids' worries increase about them going to the doctor when they see mom or dad coming home and feeling so sick. And so we want to let them know, going to the doctor is healthy and safe, and give them a chance to sort of play at that.
No, I think normalizing through play has got to be so helpful. And that just brought up kind of some of my own kids' surface anxieties, because I have an eye cancer. And so I take my kids to get eye exams. And so I can see, though, that as they get older, they're now developing a little bit more of some extra anxiety around going to the eye doctor. Mm-hmm. And that's just going to be something we're going to have to navigate, right? That it's, again, it's okay to go to the eye doctor. It's not a bad thing. Bad things don't always happen when you go to the doctor. And I think, maybe that goes back to some of those continual reassurances we can give to our kids.
Right.
But I love the teddy bear clinic. That sounds so fun. And just so valuable for those kids who can learn not only through listening and through stories, but also through play. I think that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Carissa, this has been so fantastic. I want to make sure that we link all of these opportunities and these resources for the parents in our audience who are dealing with their cancer diagnosis and also parenting. But if you kind of, as we're wrapping up, is there anything you really want to leave our listeners with to end?
Yeah, sort of circling back to the very beginning, as the adult child of a parent with cancer who died from cancer, I actually find that I inadvertently bring a lot of comfort to parents, because they go, oh, I kept hearing you say this, Danet. A lot of parents feel this guilt that they did this to their kids. They brought something terrible to their kids. And to know that their children will be okay and they could grow up and be an oncology social worker and help other families to this. I'm one person, but I do think I'm a reflection of the majority of kids that grow up and not only are they okay, but they become better for it. And back in 2018, I actually did a research project with parents going through cancer about resilience. And what I heard from these parents and from the teens that I interviewed was they actually did grow through this. And again, I want to be very careful I want to acknowledge how crappy this is. Of course, no one asked for this cancer diagnosis. This is crummy. This sucks. And there are all these opportunities to, learn how to be a good caregiver, how to be mature. The families kept saying we learned how to prioritize and the importance of spending time with each other and staying present. Even teens, who can be quite dramatic, right, are I just feel I'm so much more mature than my friends. I understand what's important in life, and they're worried about tests and driving and girlfriends, but I know the importance of life and health and being a good caregiver, and that's important to me. So I got to hear firsthand all of these growth opportunities. So I just want parents to know your kids will be okay, and not just okay, but they actually could be better and stronger because of it. So while this all sucks and we want to acknowledge that, there is also this other opportunity. And that's why it's so important to be honest and involve your kids, because if you involve them in practicing these skills of resilience, they will get to grow those and bring them into adulthood and be better humans for it.
I think that's so powerful. And honestly, that's been one of the most relieving things that I have found in talking to children who have grown up with a parent with a cancer diagnosis, right? So adults in my life. I have a good friend who had kind of a similar story to you, and then just in meeting you. So I really appreciate the insights that you shared there, Carissa, and everything that you've shared with us today. It's been so valuable. Those of you guys listening, please hit subscribe. Make sure to share this with another person who is dealing with their diagnosis. This would also be, I think, still applicable if you're the parent of a child with ocular melanoma and you're coping with the diagnosis from a parent perspective and your child has the diagnosis. I think that all of these resources, all of these books, these are all going to be valuable things that we can all learn from and that we can share with each other. So Carissa, thank you again for being here. Thank you to our listeners for being present, for subscribing if you're helping us to just build our YouTube and our podcast presence. We really appreciate anytime you guys hit subscribe, share, comment. Please share any questions, any things that you guys have, insights, comments, questions, concerns, anything that you would like to share in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. And for now, we will just say thanks again to our guest, Carissa, for being here. Thanks to the Bright Spot Network for the resources you guys have. And thank you to our sponsors for making this show possible. So we'll see you guys next time.